Hey folks, on to mini lecture number 3 in week 3 of Geography 4880. So we ended here last time. We had gone through our review of humanistic geographies, how they co-emerge with post-structuralism as a way of approaching knowledge production, and what counts as valid knowledge, and what sort of things we should focus on in research. And we discussed some of the sort of potential connections between Marxist geographies of lecture 1 in post-structuralism. So now that we have those big overviews out of the way, we can begin to see how some of these ideas have been advanced by and embodied by contemporary geographic thinkers, key thinkers, such as Tuan. So Ifu got his PhD in geography from the University of California, Berkeley in 1957. Okay, that is a very long time ago. I don't want to date myself, but well, that's, I know people very close to me who were not even born at that point. Okay, so he's had his PhD for almost, yeah, over 65 years, right? He's now professor emeritus at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's retired several times and always comes back, and so I don't know if he's actually still retired at this point, probably, but and he's written so many books, some articles as well. And he really illustrates humanistic geography. He was a key developer within that subfield in the 1970s, continues to advance it, and so we wouldn't have humanistic geographies without him. So for him, sort of the big idea here is how a mere space becomes an intensely human place is the task for the humanistic geographer. Okay, so understanding space as a kind of blank slate, devoid of anything, you know, out there, meaningless. In between that and place is human activity and human engagement with the world. And we engage with the world, engage with space, make meaning out of it, and thus create places that are by definition more meaningful, that have senses of place, okay, so on and so forth. So in other words, you know, place as location, as a set of coordinates. For Ifu, that's, you know, that's really besides the point, okay? Instead, place is really about sense of place, the kinds of meanings, memories, and so on that we develop in and through any given space. So what does that actually look like? Well, his work has really foregrounded the reality that we do live in space and come to know it personally, not necessarily, you know, we're not talking about structures that kind of dominate our lives and that are imposed upon us, but we're talking about, you know, personal engagements and experiences of places. And we come to have those engagements through things like aesthetics. Okay, so in terms of, you know, seeing landscape imagery and reading about places, as well as memories. Okay, we reflect upon all the places we've been and think fondly of them, or we don't think fondly of them, we fear them. Okay, emotions are another important way in which we engage places or engage spaces and make them into particular places. And Ifu's written, you know, books like Landscapes of Fear, in which he's kind of explored how humans have set aside parts of maps, you know, for a long time as, you know, the places we fear, or, you know, the wilderness that we fear, or whatever. Okay, morality and ethics, another way in which we come to experience and know places, and you know, stories. Okay, so, you know, obviously we like to tell stories about places. These stories, we can tell them individually, you know, to ourselves and memories. We have collective stories about places, literature about places, and that makes them meaningful. And these are all, for Ifu and humanistic geographers that follow in his footsteps, really important questions to be asking and engaging with, as opposed to just questions about how, say, capitalism makes rich places and poor places. For Ifu, it's not just that. we have to understand what is the experience of those places. What memories do we make out of them? What senses of place can we get out of them? So on and so forth. Ultimately then, for Ifu, geography is the study of the earth as the home of people, okay? And how do people make the earth into a home? Dwelling is a really important concept for humanistic geographers and for folks like Ifu. We can think of the home as the house made meaningful. Okay, a house is just a structure, four walls and drywall and whatever. But homes, at least in the Western sense, are structures that are made meaningful as places where we raise families, where we have friends over, where we work nowadays, so on and so forth. Okay, we can extend that analogy, the humanistic geographer, say, to Earth. How is it that we come to inhabit, dwell in the planet? And can we really actually maybe delimit geography as a field to everything that happens on the Earth, within, just a little shallow layer of the Earth's surface, as well as, all the human activities that make that meaningful. For Ifu, that's a way of combining physical and human geography. How do we actually approach these kinds of questions about meaning, experience, and place? Well, for the humanistic geographer, life can be fieldwork, okay? Observing, documenting, and reflecting on our own experiences, but then also doing that for the experiences of others as have been recollected and put down to paper or pen, or on paintings, novels, poems, films, all those different media that describe senses of place, memories of place, emotions in place. Those are all right material for reflecting on, well, what is it that makes a place? For instance, just a quick example, there have been a lot of movies made about Los Angeles, and in particular, which makes sense, Hollywood's right there. But in particular, there's been a lot of movies made about sort of the apocalypse in Los Angeles, okay, and the end of the world in Los Angeles, or at least the end of Los Angeles. And so what can we learn about how people in Los Angeles think of themselves by reviewing those movies that make a big scene out of the end of the world in LA? Okay, that might be a question for a humanistic geographer to explore. The whole notion of humanistic geography and its emphasis on place really returns us to several questions we've already explored around the difference between universal and special geography. Okay, so remember, the universal is the kind of abstract, let's measure things. We're going to develop ideas that are applicable everywhere and anywhere. Okay. Whereas special geography has tended to emphasize, it's the other side of the coin of geography, and it emphasizes particular places and everything that happens in one specific place. And certainly humanistic geography would seem to fall in the latter, okay? And so far as humanistic geographers tend to take a specific place like Los Angeles and make it their own and focus entire careers worth of research on that specific place. But in many ways, some might argue, as the textbook does indeed, that humanistic geography reflects a kind of universal approach as well, in the sense that, places are everywhere, and we've all, had the experience of being in a place. What could be more universal in many ways than place as a concept? Okay, specific places, might represent special geography, but the notion of place, maybe that is something that is universal. And indeed, humanistic geography and scholars like Ifu find themselves turning towards the philosophy of phenomenology, which posits that there are transcendental, which just means essential, transcending experience, to be essential things that are just that comprise the world, that have nothing to do with human existence, that exist in and of themselves. That's what phenomenology does, and it says that things like being in the world are part of that. And humanistic geographers say, well, place is also perhaps a transcendental, essential thing that is just fundamental, core to human existence, and thus deserve questions like, what is place, rather than just what is Toronto like? What is Toronto like is maybe a special geography kind of question. What is place, okay, is a universal kind of question indeed. So humanistic geography actually might shift how we think about that distinction. Humanistic geography lives on through today, and has inspired so much work, some of which we'll be engaging with later in the semester when we get to more than human geographies. Okay, so we'll see how more than human approaches to geographical thinking actually take humanistic geography and open it up a bit more. So we'll end our third mini lecture there, and we will, in the fourth mini lecture, pick it up with two more, Bill Cronin here and Neil Smith, who will really tell us a little bit more about how to read the landscape and return us to thinking about questions of structuralist approaches in geography, Marxist geography, the production of nature in space. See you then.